Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I have a very special guest. His name is Rob Schwartz, and he offers Between Lives Soul Regressions to help people awaken, heal, and understand the deeper spiritual meaning and purpose of their lives. And in particular, their greatest challenges. He has also created the Awaken Your Life's Purpose, Discovering Your Life Plan workshops, which he's offered in many countries around the world. He is an author of the books Your Soul's Love, Your Soul's Gift, and Your Soul's Plan. And he also has a blog on his website about pre-birth planning. And he's a speaker as well, as you're going to find out. So welcome. Thank you for joining the podcast.
A pleasure to be with you, Angela.
So I thought I'll just ask you, how did you step into this? It seems like a really unique thing.
It is a unique thing, and I'm very happy about that because it's very fulfilling. Believe it or not, I was in the corporate world for many years, and then at the age of 40, which is more years ago than I want to admit, three very powerful things happened, all within just a few weeks of each other. One was I had my first session ever with a medium. I wasn't even sure that I believed in mediumship. And so we start talking, and she says to me, "Your spirit guides are here." She starts to channel them, and they say to me, "You planned your life, including your biggest challenges, before you were born." And I said, "Well, why in the world would I do that?" And they said, "You did this for purposes of spiritual growth." Now, I probably would have dismissed all of this as some kind of illusion on my part, except that they then launched into this lengthy explanation of why I had planned all my challenges. And what was really compelling here is that they knew what all of them were without me telling them anything, nor had I told the medium anything about myself before the session. So that just blew my mind wide open. And in the days and weeks after that session, I thought about this constantly. And what it did for me is that it really created quite a deep healing because it allowed me to see for the first time deeper meaning to the most difficult experiences in my life. And then I thought, well, if it can create this kind of healing for me, surely it can do the same for others. That was when I first started to think about writing a book about pre-birth planning. And then within just a few weeks of that session with the medium, I had the extraordinary opportunity. I was introduced to a woman who has the ability to go into trance and channel her soul, her higher self. So I spent about 15 hours talking to her higher self about pre-birth planning, and her higher self explained to me in detail how this is done, and more importantly, why we do it. And then really the most impactful thing of all, I had a spiritually transformative experience right around that same time. I was doing nothing more than walking down the sidewalk in the middle of the afternoon, and I had this experience of divine unconditional love for every person I saw. I call it divine unconditional love because that's as close as I can get in English. There are no words to describe this love. I could say that it was transcendent, but it was beyond words. It's beyond human comprehension, really. And as this was happening, I was caused to know that we as souls are made literally from the energy of unconditional love. I got that message loud and clear. What I didn't know at the time was why this was happening. That became clear a couple of years later. By that time, I had looked at a lot of people's pre-birth plans for my first book. And what I found is that every single pre-birth plan, no exceptions, is based on complete unconditional love for every person involved. And this was true no matter how difficult the plan challenges were going to be. And then I realized, aha, that experience walking down the street 2 years ago, that was gifted to me so that when I found this result in my research, I would be certain that what I was finding was truth. But in a nutshell, that's what happened. And the combination of those three things got me to say, okay, I'll leave the corporate world. I'll try to write a book about planning our lives before we're born. 3 years later, Your Soul's Plan came out, and it's led to a much more fulfilling life than being in the corporate world, where I now feel that I'm fulfilling my own pre-birth plan.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. And that must have been something to step out of your job, and to just take a chance on this. But you
You know,
must have known intuitively that it was important.
well, I had this burning desire in my heart to do this. I just felt this is something I absolutely must do. And, I've asked myself in the years since then, why did I have that burning desire? I mean, it was completely unrelated to anything that I had learned up to that point in my life. It's not as though my parents were saying to me, we hope you grow up to be an author of books about pre-birth planning. They wouldn't have any idea what that was. And the answer that has come to me is that the desires of our heart are placed there by God. That's what I believe. So I believe that desire was put in me by God. And at my request, it was my pre-birth plan. And that desire, although it was completely irrational by, logical analytic standards, that carried me through everything I needed to go through in order to write that first book.
Wow, that's amazing. So tell me more about this Between Lives Soul Regression. Like, I know you do sessions. I seen that on your website. Like, what is that all about?
So the Between Lives Soul Regression, or BLSR for short, it's a not very well known form of hypnosis, but it's actually been around since the 1990s. It's a long session. It takes about 2 hours. With a translator, it actually takes three. You can do it as a private session, or we have many online workshops where you can do it as a group. It starts with some preliminary steps to help you relax physically and mentally. And then I guide you into a past life. It's almost always the past life that had a big impact on the plans for your current lifetime. So, for example, a lot of times people will see a past life in which they attempted to learn or do something they're trying to learn or do in this lifetime, and they didn't complete it to their own satisfaction. And so it explains why they carry the desire forward in the current lifetime to finish what was left incomplete. Another thing that often happens in the past life part, though, let's say somebody is really struggling with something in the current lifetime, a lot of times they'll be shown a past life in which they had the same challenge and handled it really, really well, which is to say they handled it with a lot of love and skill and wisdom. And when that happens, it's spirit's way of saying to the person, look, you had this same challenge in the past life, and look how beautifully and brilliantly you did then. Just keep this in mind. You are the one who did it then, so you can do it again now. So it's very inspiring to people. In any case, you leave the past life, you cross back over to the other side, which is actually very easy and gentle. When you get there, you're usually greeted by a spirit guide. The guide tells you what you need to know about the past life. And then the guide takes you to what is called your council of elders. These are the very wise, loving, and highly evolved beings who oversee your personal evolution. They are so highly evolved, it's really beyond human comprehension. They know literally everything about you. Everybody has their own council. And when you get to your council, you can ask any question on any subject. And if it's for your highest good to know the answer, they will answer. Usually people ask, what did I plan for this lifetime? Why did I make those plans? How am I doing? And how can I do better? But you can ask about any person, any relationship, any challenge, past or present. You can ask about your career. People ask about physical health, mental health, emotional issues. People ask, what is their mission, their purpose in this incarnation? Literally any question you can think of, you can ask. And so by the time this long process is over, people come out with a really rich and deep understanding of why they're in this lifetime. And if they then go on to integrate that wisdom into their life, it can really be life-changing. It gives new and deeper meaning and purpose to everything.
Hmm, that sounds amazing.
Quite an experience.
Yeah, yeah, I bet. So, um, so we pre-plan our lives. I actually believe that is true. I've heard that before, and coming through the experience that I've had with my husband dying, and going through that whole grieving process, I've really come to know that who I am now wasn't who I was before. That a lot of things have changed, and I believe that a lot of this. I mean, I hate to say that my husband died on purpose, but It's like so much has transformed since then that it makes you really question, why do these things happen?
Well, there are two tracks on which I can answer that question. One is logical, left brain, analytic, and the other is more heart-based. So let's start with the logical reasons for planning life challenges. And we could spend hours talking about any of them, but just to rattle them off quickly, it's balancing and releasing karma, healing, which means healing unhealed energies from past lives that are carried forward into the current lifetime, service to others, experiencing contrast, which means experiencing duality, basically a world in which there's something other than love. And that teaches us the meaning of love. And the fifth and last logical reason is correcting false feelings or false beliefs about oneself. The most common being a belief that one is powerless, unworthy, or worthless. So there are the logical reasons. But if we were to spend hours talking about those, most likely at the end of that conversation, you would say something to me like, okay, Rob, I can understand now why some souls plan mild or moderate challenges, but I still can't wrap my mind around, for example, the idea that I would plan with my husband for him to transition when he did. And if you put it to me that way, that you couldn't wrap your mind around it, I would agree with you and you would be exactly right. The mind cannot understand that. And when I say mind here, I mean the ego mind. The ego mind makes decisions based on a cost-benefit analysis. What will I get out of this? What will it cost me? And is it going to be worth it? There are factors like that that go into pre-birth planning, but that is not primarily how those choices are made. They're made by the heart. When you are back on the other side, the ego mind is not your operating system, the heart is. And the heart wants one thing and one thing only, and that is to give and receive love fully and freely. So let's say that you were back on the other side and you were planning this current lifetime. You're talking with your husband from this lifetime, who is almost certainly a member of your soul group. Almost certainly the two of you have had many past lives together. There's tremendous love and trust that have been established by working together in so many past lives. And let's say he comes to you and he says to you, Angela, in my next lifetime, I'm planning for it to be relatively brief. I'm going to transition around such and such an age. And then he explains why he wants to do that. And then he says, I love you so much, and I know that you love me, and we've been able to help each other learn our lessons so well in all these past lives. Would you agree to be my partner in this relatively short incarnation? If the heart is your operating system, and I assure you it is, then your response is almost certainly yes. Yes, I love you dearly. And if that's what you want and need from me, then yes, I will play that role for you. The mind is never going to understand that, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm learning that, there's the human aspect of ourselves and there's a spiritual aspect of ourselves. And it can get very confusing. Sometimes I want to separate the two and just kind of, it makes it easier for me that my human self is very upset.
Yeah,
And my spiritual self is going, you know what? We're learning a lot. Yeah. How much of our life is actually pre-planned? Because I know we have free will as well.
right. The format of my 3 books is that the chapters are organized by type of life challenge. And I just go through all the major challenges we have here in the Earth School one by one. And when I did so I researched people's pre-birth plans in part by working with mediums and channels, in part by doing the hypnosis that I do. And when we did these mediumship and channeling sessions, I generally asked Spirit, what percentage of the time is this challenge planned, whatever it was we were looking at? There was some variability in the answer to that question, but it usually came in around 70%. That means that there's still a big chunk of things that happen here that were not planned, at least not as a high probability before we were born. But it's important to understand when we talk about something being planned, it doesn't usually mean set in stone. There are some things that are set in stone, but actually very few. Normally, when we talk about something being planned, it means planned as a potential. And whether or not it actualizes depends upon your free will decisions and the free will decisions of the other people who are in your life.
Okay. So we do have, because sometimes it feels like, okay, well, if we have a soul plan, then we're just living it out, right? But
Well,
yeah.
I had that question, and I spent a lot of time researching that particular question. And I was assured again and again, talking to people's guardian angels, their spirit guides, ascended masters like Jesus, that plan does not mean set in stone, except for a very small number of things. Because if it did mean that, then we would be nothing more than automatons. And if we were automatons, then no true learning ever occurs.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes perfect sense. How can understanding this about ourselves, I'm sure that, you've had losses in your life. There's been grief in your life. How has understanding this helped you through that process?
All right, so let me share something personal here. I grew up in a very dysfunctional home. My mother has significant mental health issues and was extremely abusive to me for the first 16 years of my life. I know from a spiritual experience I had about a year ago, I had this experience in which about 75% of my consciousness crossed over to the other side, and about 25% stayed in body. And while I was back on the other side, my mother was there. Now she's still here in a body, so this had to have been her higher self. When my mother showed up there was this feeling of just overwhelming love for her, much stronger than I've felt since being in body in this lifetime. And it was concentrated right in the heart chakra. It was just overwhelmingly powerful. Not only did I feel it, but I just kept saying to her, and this was just a spontaneous thing on my part. I kept saying to her, I love you, I love you, I love you. And I could feel this tremendous love between the two of us. And that showed me experientially something that I've understood intellectually for many years now, which is that when we script these roles for each other, like the kind of role my mother played in this lifetime, that's something that's between the incarnate personalities when you're here in the earth school, when you're here in a body. But the personality is really just an illusion. It comes and goes. It's not who you eternally are. Who you eternally are is a being made from the energy of unconditional love. And that includes everybody, even my mother. She wasn't unconditionally loving in this incarnation, but she is on the other side, as are you, as am I, as is everybody else. And so that experience of just this overwhelming love that was between the two of us, that said to me, this is what our relationship is like on the other side. We have this agreement for her to play this very, very challenging role for me in this lifetime, which she played quite well. I wouldn't want to go through anything like that again, but it did a lot for me. It created a spiritual awakening. It got me on the path that led to writing these books that have made a difference in people's lives. And my understanding of pre-birth planning pulled me out of victim consciousness. I spent a good portion of my life wondering, why did that happen? It's so unfair. It was so horrible. Oh, poor me, I'm a victim. The universe is cruel. If God is really loving, how could God let this happen? The sorts of questions people always ask. And I understand now that I'm not a victim. I'm the powerful soul who created this very challenging life plan with good reason. Another thing people need to keep in mind, when you're back on the other side, planning your challenges, you're very much aware that a lifetime is actually very brief. Nobody is permanently harmed by anything that happens here. And yet the wisdom that comes out of it becomes part of you literally for all eternity. So from that perspective, that an incarnation is quite brief, nobody is permanently harmed, the wisdom will be with you for eternity. From that perspective, it does make sense that some souls, not all, but some, would play in very difficult challenges like you and I did.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know that a lot of us come to have certain beliefs as we're growing up. Like you would have gained some through your experiences. And, we have beliefs that we are unworthy or beliefs that, how do we how do we let go of those beliefs that are untrue?
The first step, and really the most important, is just to have a little bit of willingness or openness to considering the possibility that some of what you believe may actually not be true. That little bit of openness or willingness creates the space for the universe to come in and teach you what you believe, what portion of what you believe is actually not true. And once you've created that little bit of openness or willingness, then you can chip away at the false belief over time. So let's say that somebody feels that they are unworthy, and that belief generates an internal dialogue, an internal story when they're with other people, that perhaps people are mistreating them, disrespecting them, however, whatever kind of lens they're looking at the world through. Well, instead of just accepting those interpretations, and that's what they are, they're interpretations, then when they come up, you start to question them. Well, I feel like this person disrespected me and it's triggering this feeling of unworthiness I have, but did they really? Or was that their intention? Or could it be that that was just the lens I was looking through? And you may not have clear answers to those questions, but if you're staying open to seeing the answers, they become clear over time. You just have to chip away at it repeatedly over a period of time.
Mm, yeah, and that makes good sense. What I've learned from my process is that a lot of emotions come up with those beliefs and their triggers, and they're pointing to something that is untrue, especially when they're negative, or what we refer to as negative emotions, despair or frustration or guilt. So I've found that you have to really lean into those emotions. Is that what you have found?
Yeah, and I think this is one of many reasons why meditation is very, very important on a spiritual path. I'm not really not sure that people can get where they want to go without a meditation practice of some kind. So what you will do in at least an insight or vipassana meditation, when these sorts of triggers come up, instead of distracting yourself, which is really the most common response, you look at them and you find that by turning toward them instead of away from them, they very often tend to dissolve. They just don't actually have any substance or duration to them. And then if you feel into the body and you ask yourself, where am I feeling this in the body? That can be very informational. Feelings in the body, sensations are informational in nature. And when you tune into those, not only do you get helpful information, but again, it helps the trigger to just dissolve. So this is a skill. It takes a long time generally for people to cultivate it, but that's the whole purpose of insight meditation. And I would recommend it to anyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know that a lot of people, when they hear the word meditation, they're like, I can't. But I have found that, it's not a long time that you need to sit in silence. A few minutes to start out is adequate.
I do agree. I think any amount of time is better than none. I think if you can get yourself to do 20 minutes a day, at least 5 or 6 days a week, that's a good baseline to work from. If somebody enjoys it and wants to meditate longer, that's fine. I don't know that you necessarily need more than 20 minutes, though. That should do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's
And
the consistency that's really important.
yeah, and I think like because it becomes enjoyable, if you start out small, at least I found that it just seemed like, it was actually kind of enjoyable to just sit and feel into the body and just relax for a few minutes. And then it feels like maybe I'd like to do more because it does feel good and you do get some insights through that.
Yeah, I would caution people though not to start grasping after feeling good in meditation. If that happens, it's wonderful. Enjoy it while it's there. But if you're doing insight or Vipassana meditation, what you will eventually find is that, yes, there will be times that it feels really good, but there's also going to be many times where something is going to come up in the meditation that you would really rather not look at. And you're going to feel resistance to that. But if you can continue just to sit there and look at it and be with it, that's all you're asked to do. Just be present with it and be present with your own resistance without going into resistance to your resistance. If you can just do that, insights come and healing comes, and it's just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find that if I do some writing afterwards, it brings more insight. Um, can you tell us a little bit about the ascension process? Because everybody's talking about us ascending and the earth ascending.
Well, I certainly believe we're right smack in the middle of it. Ascension, as I understand it, is literally that, ascending in vibration or frequency. And we've already moved from the third dimension, or what really should be called third density, into fourth density. And we're on our way to fifth density, which is a vibration of oneness, consciousness, and unconditional love. So essentially, we're going home while staying in a physical body. So being here for ascension is an extraordinary blessing. Ascension is caused by light from source flooding the planet. The light has the effect of bringing to the surface, bringing to conscious awareness everything unlike itself, everything of a lower vibration. It has to do that in order to trigger the ascension because those lower vibrational energies can't go with us into fifth density. So this process is called purification. We're purifying the lower vibrational energies, and it's happening collectively to the whole human race, which is why you see more craziness than ever in the news. It's also happening individually in every person's life, whether they know it or not. It's good to be aware that this is happening because what's going to happen is your stuff is going to come up. It's going to come into conscious awareness. And if you understand that it's coming up to be purified or cleared, then you can resist the very natural human temptation to stuff it back down. That's not a good idea in any incarnation, but it's a particularly bad idea in an ascension lifetime because it has to be cleared if you're going to go through the ascension. So when your stuff comes up, all you're really asked to do is just look at it. And here again, you can cultivate that skill in meditation. Just be present with it. Try not to resist it. If you go into resistance, note the resistance, but don't judge yourself for it. It's also very helpful if you can sincerely thank the energy, whatever it might be, for whatever it's taught you, then bless it, and then set an intention to release it to the universe for transmutation. Those are basically the steps in letting go of lower vibrational energies. It's not a complicated or difficult process. You just have to know what they are and be willing to do it.
Hmm. Yeah. And isn't that profound? Because life, understanding that and all the chaos that you say, is going on in the world, the wars and all those kinds of things, when you think about, the light coming in, I think I've heard you say before, more light creates more shadow. And so more of these chaotic things seem to be coming to light. We're seeing more of it, and it's scaring a lot of people. There's a lot of fear.
But here's the important thing to know about light and shadow. It's true that the brighter the light, the darker the shadow, but that's only up until a certain point at which there's so much light that it actually dissolves the shadow. So I think humanity is at the point of maximal darkness of the shadow, but that means we're one step away from dissolution of the shadow.
Yeah. And isn't that a big mouthful of hope right there? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I won't keep you much longer. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we go?
There's one thing I should have mentioned in regard to the Between Lives Soul Regression. When people are with their council of elders, very often, if they've lost a loved one, they'll ask the council to bring the loved one into the meeting, and then they can talk to that person directly. And if the person's death is something they don't understand, why did it happen? Why did it have to be like that? You can ask the person directly, why did you leave at that time? Is this really something that we planned together? If I agreed to that plan, why did I agree to that? How do I heal from it now? How do I know when you're around? Will you send me signs? Anything you'd like to say to the person, including expressions of love and forgiveness or asking for forgiveness. So that can be a big part of a Between Lives Soul Regression, and it's deeply, deeply healing.
Beautiful. Well, how can people find you?
I'm at yoursoulsplan.com. When you get there, something will pop up asking you to sign up for the newsletter. I would invite everyone to do that. That'll keep you posted on what we're doing. If you go to the events page, you can see all the workshops, and there are a lot of them on an ongoing basis. If you click on sessions in the main menu, you'll go to the Between Lives Soul Regression page, and there's actually a 1-hour video of part of a Between Lives Soul Regression on that page. So you can see exactly what it consists of.
Beautiful. Well, I encourage people to check all that out. And I just want to thank you again for taking the time today to do this. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're very welcome. And I want to thank you again for having the podcast. I think you're bringing a lot of healing and much needed light into our world. And I applaud you for fulfilling your pre-birth plan.
Oh, thank you so much. And I thank everybody for listening, and have a great day.